Heather, I know we talk so much about this season, but right now, sort of walk everybody through what's happening for the playoff committee members, like how they're getting ready for their first opportunity to vote next week.
Well, one of the things that they're going to do is forget that AP top 10 that you just showed. They are going in with a, quote, clean slate. You'll hear that all the time. New committee chair Gary Barta will be the face of that group, talking to Reese Davis on Tuesday nights. And as we sit here today, they plan to do this in person the same way they do every season at the Gaylord Texan Resort in Grapevine, Texas. CFP Executive Director Bill Hancock told me that it feels like a bubble for them, and they wouldn't be doing it if it didn't feel safe. Again, that could change any minute, but he told me that they've gone through great lengths to make the committee members feel comfortable. But the point, Fitz, is that they feel like they need to be together to truly have that conversation and debate and discussion in the way that you can do in person. And as we all know, as we have lived through this pandemic, everything is different on Zoom. Conversations are different. So if they have to, they will, but that's where it stands right now.
I would give anything to see a lot of these old-time athletic directors going off on a team on mute. So while we will miss out on that, these conversations are going to be important, Heather. And I'm curious what the committee said about how they're going to judge. We've seen conferences have minimum game criteria for teams to be eligible to compete in conference titles. But what have you heard so far about the criteria in this very different season for the selection committee?
Well, Bill Hancock has told me that it is, quote, status quo for the selection committee. The protocol has not changed. As you mentioned, there are some benchmarks in different conferences. Wisconsin clearly has to play every single remaining game on its schedule just to contend for the Big Ten championship and play in that conference title game if they get there. The committee does not have any such benchmarks. So, yes, you will see them debating and discussing a team that has 2 wins like Wisconsin and comparing it against a team that has 8 or 9 wins. It's just that's the world that they're debating right now, and everybody's going to have to lower their bar for fairness if we're talking honestly about this.
Heather, I'm going to ask a very ridiculous question because I go hard for the Big 12, Clemson and Miami, right? So I'm going to ask a Big 12 question because last season we saw Oklahoma in the first CFP rankings. They were ranked number 10. Obviously, they ended up in the CFP. This year, the highest ranked Big 12 team right now is Oklahoma State in the AP football rankings. They're right across the street from the CFP. How likely, the conference is, how likely is it that a Big 12 school get into the CFP?
It's unlikely, but it's not impossible. But I think you're smart to bring it up because, first of all, the ongoing uncertainty during the pandemic. None of us knows how many games anyone is going to wind up playing. But when you look at Oklahoma State, you cannot rule out any one-loss team that has the potential in the Power 5 to win its conference. Now, should they lose again, then it's an entirely different conversation, and we're really not talking about the Big 12 anymore. But as we sit here today, I would not eliminate them because so much can still happen in college football. I would start to eliminate them because they don't look like a top 4 team.
All right, I gotta just, by the way, we're gonna peel back a curtain here. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that work on this show. We didn't tell anybody we were going to Oklahoma State, and they had the highlights ready. Man, we got the best staff ever on this show. I am just stunned. We're all looked at each other like, all right.
They have Oklahoma State highlights.
All right, I'm going to start asking about UNLV, see if they can. Okay, no, so all right, Heather, a lot of conversation about whether or not the playoff committee should consider postponing the playoff. I want to ask you just to cut through all the noise and tell me what's real when it comes to any conversation about the playoff committee deciding to change the dates of the actual playoffs.
What's real is that there is a general consensus amongst the college football commissioners to get this thing done as planned and name a champion on January 11th in Miami Gardens, Florida. That being said, they are talking about it behind the scenes because the biggest question they're facing right now is what happens if a player tests positive on a semifinalist team. This is the issue that they're surrounded by right now because you have Alabama and Clemson just hypothetically going to the semifinals. They get there, they get to their hotels, and somebody can't play, a team can't play because of the contact tracing issues and the quarantine. Then what do? That's where the discussion comes in. How far do you push it back? And as you look at those open windows in terms of the NFL playoffs, I believe, because I don't have a calendar in front of me, that it's January 30th? That might be the next open Saturday. Do you wait to play the semifinals until then? There's just all kinds of different questions. And if there is a team that tests positive, you've got Clemson sitting there, right, saying, okay, how long do we sit here in our hotel for 2 weeks and wait for this? So those are the issues that they're dealing with, which is why everyone is holding their breath every weekend, including this one, to hope that they can play these games, get them rescheduled, and cross the finish line on January 11th.
Holding your breath is the understatement in all this. That team waiting is Notre Dame, by the way. But outside of that, Heather, it has had us all holding our breath, wondering if we could get something we hadn't seen before. We know it's almost seemed impossible for the group of 5 to break into this party at certain times. Is this a year, because of the uncertainty, that it's, I won't say super likely, but more likely than normal that a team like Cincinnati, like BYU, could finally crash the party?
Well, guys, I think that that's one thing that we're going to be talking about a week from today, because that's one of the things I'm most curious about the first ranking. Where do they put BYU and Cincinnati, given the uneven amount of games that have been played and those resumes? Yes, to answer your question, it is a possibility. I still think it's unlikely. If I had to give you a prediction, it would be that those two teams play each other in a New Year's Six Bowl. I think if you put their resumes on paper, down the stretch, Cincinnati with an American Athletic Conference championship title, I think they get the edge over BYU. But BYU has Zach Wilson. He could be a Heisman contender. It's tough. It's a tough decision, but I think it's possible.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.